Hello everyone, my name's Mark Collins. I'm the Brand Partnerships Director at Electric House. And firstly, I just want to say a huge thank you to everyone for attending our webinar, which is Designing for the Speed of Feed. For those of you who are on the call who are not familiar with Electric House, we are a social media publishing group. We create, we publish, and we distribute video content. Electric House owns and operates the On the Tools and the On a Budget UK-based communities and the groups within them. So on the next slide, so in 2019, On the Tools was consistently watched by more UK males than anyone else, which is obviously something we're extremely proud of. As you can see, there are some huge names in there, such as Sky Sports, Channel 4, and Lab Bible. It also goes to show that although the UK construction industry is made up of approximately 3 million people, the content we create is far-reaching and goes way beyond this construction industry demographic. So the webinar today will look at, with so much content competing for your customers' attention on Facebook and Instagram feeds, you're no longer just trying to stand out amongst your competitors. On social media, everyone is a competitor. So how do you get noticed, build your brand, and generate sales? Will Bonadil will highlight some of the ways to make yourself visible in this busy space. We'll then put some questions to our amazing panel today, which includes Abby Swindle from Electric House, Karen Worthington from Facebook, Louise Coppola from OMD UK, and Barry Davidson from Mediacom. For your information, the webinar is due to last an hour, so we'll be finishing today around 10:30. With regards to questions, if you do have any questions, please feel free to get these in throughout the presentation or when we go to our panel, and you can do this by clicking the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. So designing for speed of feed. So Will Bonadil is an award-winning marketeer and international keynote speaker. He's a senior client partner in London for social media publishing group Electric House. Having previously worked agency side on brands such as Disney and Domino's Pizza, as well as in-house at McDonald's UK as their social media editor-in-chief, Will now supports brands of all sizes in creating, producing, distributing and amplifying video content through Electric House's dedicated social media communities, which deliver over 30 million video views each and every week. Over to you, Will.
Thank you very much, Mark, and good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's great to have you all on board. So yeah, basically, I'm going to take you through a few slides just to kind of make sure that we're all kind of on the same level before we head into the panel, which is really the main event today. And I want to talk to you about what we mean exactly by designing for the speed of feed. So let's start by just looking at media, social media in general, and marketing channels that people are using, people like you and me, who are trying to reach the right audiences at the right time. So if we look at where adults in the UK are spending their time in terms of media consumption, we can look at how many adults there are and also the amount of time they're spending with each channel. If we go to 2014, you can see that commercial TV is far and away the winner. It's where the most adults spent the most time, which is why if you wanted to reach a load of adults in the UK, you would probably do the first ad break on something like I'm Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here or X Factor. Move forward 4 years to 2018 and you can see there's been an absolutely massive shift towards mobile internet. Now mobile internet is where you are going to be able to reach the most adults for the most amount of time. And second to that, going past where commercial TV was, is Facebook and Instagram. Still way ahead of commercial TV these days. So that's really good news for us as marketers. And it shows that, everybody on this call is in the right space if we're looking to reach people online, particularly on social feeds on their mobile. But the thing is, a lot of other people know this fact as well. And so as a result, we have to compete with a lot of other things that are trying to get their attention when they're using mobile internet and Facebook and Instagram. So that is the question. How can we grab attention on social media? And what I'm going to take you through now is a few kind of concepts and ideas to help you be able to do that. So if we first look at why people use social media, we're actually at a point now where keeping up with friends and being connected with the people you know is no longer the main reason why people use social. Actually, the number one reason to use social is to stay up to date with news and current events, followed by staying in touch with friends. But then two other really big reasons that are very close behind that is to find funny or entertaining content and to fill up my spare time. And so both of those things are definitely reasons why brands might be able to get involved and be able to add value when people are on their news feeds. We look at other reasons too, and it's kind of generally the same sorts of themes. But another big one at 31% is to research and find products to buy. So that is the number 7 reason why people use social, as in the top 10. So it's definitely the right place to be marketing to people. We just need to make sure that what we're doing really stands out, and like we say, is designed for the speed of feed. So in order to kind of bring that to life and what we mean by that, I want to do a little test. So I want everybody to look at the screen, if you weren't already, and I want you to tell me via the chat box what you see on screen when I count down. Okay, so everybody look, get ready to add it into the chat and give me as many details as you can. 1, 2, 3. What did everybody see? Okay, so we've got a dog with a bow tie, blue bow tie with white dots from Hannah. Thank you very much. A pug. Great. So as you can see, loving this, loads of responses. You all saw it. You all knew it was a dog for sure. A lot of you were able to say that it was a pug with a blue spotty bow tie, and you were absolutely right. That is the picture. Unfortunately, nobody said a woman's hand with lime nail polish. That would have been extra bonus points, but you know, I'll forgive you for that. The fact is, that picture that I showed you for that split second, that was literally on the screen for 0.4 seconds. And yet you guys were able to get all of that information just looking at it that quickly. Which totally blows my mind that you were able to do it. So thank you very much for taking part in that. So I hope that kind of makes the point that your brain and its ability to process what it sees and remember it is really, really fast. In fact, the human brain needs less than half a second to engage with advertising and trigger a reaction, be it positive or negative. So that's all you've really got as a chance to kind of land something that's going to hook people in. I'm sorry to say that was on desktop. It's actually even faster on mobile. So you technically have even less time when somebody is on their mobile. So that's led a lot of people to say, right, well, millennials, they've got the attention span of a goldfish. I totally disagree with that. How can it be that they have the attention span of a goldfish and yet they will spend 10 hours in a row watching a whole series of Game of Thrones? So what we suggest, and others are kind of agreeing with now, is that it's not that the attention span is short, it's just that people's ability to see if they want something and if they want to give it their full attention or not is very quick. But if you are able to hook them in early and quickly, then they're willing to give you way more time than you might expect. So this is what we're saying, and somebody else has said too, that people's attention spans aren't shrinking, they're simply evolving. And that shouldn't come as a surprise, because we know that people are scrolling through 90 meters of news feeds every day. That's the equivalent of the Statue of Liberty. That's how much content they're looking at. And so you've got to work hard to make sure that the post that you put out is something that is really going to stop them in their tracks. We call it thumb stopping content, make them take note and remember it. So how can we do that? What we need to think about, and this is kind of the main point of this presentation, is we need to design for the speed of feed. And what we mean by that is there's a variety of different ways and kind of times and sessions that people put into using their newsfeed and being on social. Is it a shorter kind of on the go kind of session where they're probably out and about on the way to somewhere or catching the bus, in which case you need to give them a simpler message? Or are they going to give much longer time to their news feeds and their Facebook or Instagram or other social media session, in which case they're more likely to be leaning back, appreciating what they're seeing, you know, for much longer and really giving it their full attention, in which case you can give them a more complex message. The good news is that Facebook and Instagram provides a variety of different formats that will let you do that tailored to how the person is using social at the time. But what we need to remember, and this is by no means absolutely scientific, but it is kind of a general rule of thumb that we and Facebook both subscribe to, that really about 10% of time that people are online is when they're looking for that fully immersive kind of consumption habit. And I think a lot of brands will kind of focus purely on that, but actually you need to consider that about 70% of the time, generally speaking, they're looking for something a lot quicker, a lot more immediate, and it's going to be a much shorter session. And then in between that, about 20% of the time, they're actually willing to interact or engage with a post. So I'd really challenge everybody on this call to think about when you're creating content, and if you look at what you've created over the last month or 2 or 3, Are you really lending yourself to these real user behaviors, or are you focusing too much on one end of the spectrum or the other? So how can we make sure that an ad's creative really stands out? Fundamentally, it comes down to these 4 powers, which I'm going to take you through, and I'm going to give you some examples of as well. First and foremost, stopping power. So we need to make sure that we're grabbing attention early and we start that cognitive process that we talked about with the pug. Next up, transmission power. So ensure that the ad and its components are going to be understood. Keep it simple so that it's really easy to understand, just in case people are looking for that more immediate message. The power of persuasion. So ensure that the ad triggers positive emotion and it appeals to viewers. And make it memorable. So use locking power to ensure the ad message is memorable in order to increase impact. And I'm going to take you through a bit now of how to do each of those ones. Ideally, though, you want to make sure that, like we say, it happens in the first second or less, so no pressure. So first, what do we mean by thumb-stopping content? So this is an example of a post that we did on our On a Budget channel. So On a Budget is all about kind of living your best life at the best possible value. So this is a recipe video that we did for an Oreo cheesecake. So I won't go into all the details of how exactly you make that cake, but you'll notice that, we talk about the 3-second audition. So, making sure that those first 3 seconds really hook people in. You'll notice that we showed the finished cake, and we actually added some movement to it with that kind of food porny shot of, chocolate being drizzled all over it. So we do that for a reason. We do that to grab you and grab your attention so that you're more likely to hang around and watch the video. If we'd started by just listing out the ingredients or even just showing the static picture of the cake, it wouldn't have grabbed people in the same way. So really think about how you're kind of bringing your best bits of the video that you're posting on social to the front rather than a kind of big reveal at the end. So by doing that, you're much more likely to grab attention in those first 3 seconds and start that cognitive process. And you'll also notice that we said the name of the product up front as well. So even if I don't watch the full video, I still know that On a Budget is giving me an Oreo cheesecake recipe, and the Oreo brand is very much front and center from the very beginning. Next up, keep it simple. So this is a really nice example from Costa Coffee that I saw in my newsfeed. Proper coffee, now in a can, and when the video plays, so really simple to understand. It's in a can, all the text that I need is there. And if I'm willing to give it 2 seconds, I can see that a coffee cup pops out. So like I say, totally easy to understand. It doesn't expect too much of the audience. All the key information is there. I see it, I get it, I move on. And it's really designed for sound off. There's actually no sound on that video anyway. It doesn't exist, and it really works without it. On the subject of sound, what we find generally is that 92% of Facebook feed posts are viewed with sound off. That's not to say that people aren't willing to put the sound on for a reason, but generally with the kind of autoplay mechanic, that is the number that you're dealing with. And for that reason, we really recommend that you add captions. So that could be subtitles at the bottom, or it could just be keywords popping up during the video at the most important times. When you do that, there's a 12% increase in view duration. So it really is worth putting the extra effort into creating those. We've talked a lot about the feed. If we just touch on stories for a second, 60% of Instagram stories are viewed with sound on. So it's very different to the news feed. And actually, stories with sound are deemed more relevant. And back when I was working at McDonald's, we found that we had an ad that promoted downloads of the McDonald's app. And we did a test. We did the same ad on stories, one with sound, and it wasn't like proper music, it was just sound effects, and one with no sound, totally silent. And we found that the story ad with sound, even though it was exactly the same apart from that, actually drove more downloads of the app. So if you can add any sort of sound effects or music or popping, anything you can add, it will really help the performance of your ad as well. So that's why we really encourage you to design for sound off, because it might be that's how people consume the content. But if they do have the sound, then you can delight them with sound on as well. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Next, we talked about persuasion, so the power of persuasion, and this is a nice example from Domino's Pizza. So building for mobile can really transform an ad's impact. This is an example on the left that they originally did. It's a perfectly fine ad. It's not great, if I'm honest. it's wide, so it's not taking up a huge amount of space. It doesn't really grab you, and it really is relying on that text at the top to do all of the heavy lifting. Some decisions are hard. This one is not. Order 2 or more of your favorite items for $5.99 each. So they could do a lot better there. And to be honest, the food, I don't really know what I'm looking at. Obviously, there's a pizza in the back, but I don't know what those things at the front or any of those things on the right actually are. So you can take that, or you can create one that's really designed for mobile, which looks more like this. So those Christie bread things look absolutely phenomenal on that one on the right, whereas the one on the left, I couldn't even tell you what those things were in the background. So really lands that message. It's constantly rewarding, good use of stacking, so you have all of the different items on screen at the same time, but in 3 different slots, and the caption at the top a lot more fun and human, saying feeling hungry yet I'm much more likely to respond to that or share it with a friend. And finally, we talked about making it memorable. So this is an example that we did for our On the Tools channel with Bosch power tools. You could simply show the power tool up front, or show a picture of it, or talk about the specs. But what we did was almost like that top-down video, but much more about garden furniture and how Bosch tools can help you with it. So the video goes on and you see step by step, and you'll notice, there's tools there. You saw him adding the battery pack to the drill. There's power tools from Bosch used throughout the video to help land that message. So, it's got that locking power. It doesn't, like I say, just focus on the tool. It focuses on what anybody can make using the tools in a way that appeals way beyond just construction workers. It's something that you can do in your own garden, come up with something really cool, that a table that just holds everything and does everything you need. So we're constantly rewarding throughout that video, showing how to do it, the different tools and what they can do to help you with that kind of garden project, which pushes that memorable ad message, because the only tools you ever see in that are Bosch ones. We do glorious close-ups of each one, so you can see what it can do and what it looks like, and the fact that it is from Bosch. And we use that in order to increase the impact, because you're much more likely to share a video showing the ultimate table than, like I say, just a close-up of the tool. Now, will have noticed that kind of the best-in-class examples that we've shown here have all been square or vertical ads. And actually, research shows that these are the most memorable. For one, it's how we hold our phone. It's unrealistic, unfortunately, to expect people to turn their phone to its side in order to watch your ad, in its full glory. It's just not going to happen. It's just not a user behavior. And a square or vertical ad takes up more screen space, which is what helps it become more memorable. In fact, when you run those sorts of ads, there's an increase in people remembering that they saw it. So being asked afterwards, did you see an ad for Bosch? People are more likely to say they do remember it if it's a square or vertical ad. And for the geeks among us, or those who are looking to actually create these themselves, a 4:5 ratio is the sweet spot on Facebook and Instagram. That is the maximum size that's going to take up the maximum space in the feed that will work across both Facebook and Instagram. So if you only want to make one version of an ad, make sure it's a 4:5 ratio. I'm going to already play this while I talk, because TV ads can be adapted for mobile. So this is a TV ad from Bose. It's a beautiful TV ad, but it is not designed for social. So we've been talking now for probably about 10-15 seconds. You still don't know what this is for. You know it's Bose, but we actually don't know what the product is. I can recognize FKA Twigs, the singer. She's dancing in London, but what has this got to do with editing? Why am I seeing this ad? Take that, and then they designed a special version just for social that looks like this. So much quicker, much more to the point, rewarding throughout. If you do have it with sound, it's even more rewarding, but you see the headphones from the very first second, and things are constantly happening, and it keeps you much more likely to watch it. And so that's why we saw in the research that 20% more people watched the whole optimized video on the right compared to the one on the left. And people were far, far more likely to remember the one on the right as well. I mean, in the time I taught, we never actually saw the headphones on the one on the left. And as we saw, it's just unlikely that people are going to necessarily going to watch that for the whole time. So really what we're saying is you can create ads from TV ads to work on mobile, but it's really better to create for mobile in mind from the very beginning. When you create a mobile first advert, you are more likely to have a user remember that they saw it and watch it for longer. Much more than those kind of traditional narratives. And by traditional narratives, again, I'm talking about those kind of classic TV ads, which you're not really sure what it's about until the very end when it is revealed. You want to completely switch that around on social. You want to kind of have the big reveal at the beginning and then constantly reward throughout to work out how you got to that point. That is what's going to work for you for the best. So if we take all of what we talked about and we kind of show like putting that into practice, this is something that we did for our friends at McDonald's. So the brief to us was, can we make sure that people are aware of the full breadth of our breakfast menu? So what we did was we created this video, which I'll show you now.
Hi, can I take your order, please?
Hi, I have a very particular order for breakfast. An order I've acquired over a very long time.
Okay, what can I get for you?
I would like a sausage and egg McMuffin and a black coffee. Yes, I want the flat white, I want the breakfast wrap, and I want the hash brown. I asked my friend if he wants to order.
Okay, what else can I get for you?
I'd like a bacon and egg muffin, please. Muffin. Muffin.
Would you like a drink with that?
I don't know, I'll ask him. Would you like a drink with that? Yes, I'd like a drink with that. I'd like a water, please. My mouth is dry. So hard, is it?
Is that all today?
Yes, that's all. Now get to the cooking.
Okay, if you want to check your order on the screen and drive around to the next window.
Okay, I will. Thanks. Muffin. Muffin.
So make no mistake, every item that he ordered very much went through a kind of scripting process to make sure that everything was covered, that the new flat white was also mentioned. And so that video, yes, it's a guy in a high-vis jacket in a van, but fundamentally it would have worked had he been in a Mini as well. That is a video that goes way beyond construction, and that was the brief that we were given as well. It was to appeal to a much, much broader audience, and it definitely worked out that way. It was the #1 piece of McDonald's branded partner content for 2019. It was the #4 most viewed piece of Facebook branded content for entertainment publishers for all of 2019. It generated 8 million views, and it was shared 111,000 times. So we use the captions. It's constantly rewarding throughout, and even from the beginning, you can see that he is ordering a McDonald's. So if you don't watch the whole thing, you're still reminded of the McDonald's drive-through and the convenience you can get when you're looking for breakfast on the go. So that's kind of the intro. We're going to move on to the panel. If you've got any questions, I'll be able to answer them as part of the panel, but I'd love to hear what the panel guys think as well about your questions if you've got any. So I'm going to hand back over to Mark, and thank you so much for listening. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Will. Thank goodness that everybody got the dog in the bow tie, because the success of the presentation kind of hinged on that, didn't it? So that was a bit nerve-wracking, but yes, thanks, Will. So I'm going to move over now and give an introduction to the panel. I've got a few questions for these guys, and what we'll do is we'll do a couple of questions that I already have, then we'll go out to the audience for any questions, and so on and so on. So first up, we have Abby Swindle, who is the head of social at Electric House. Abby is responsible for the management and growth of the On the Tools and the On a Budget communities, collectively totaling around 11 million members. Rising from apprentice to head of social in under 2 years, Abby has grown with the business, forging close relationships with key stakeholders from all major platforms, and also receiving accolades including Young Marketer of the Year and the Rising Star Award. Next up, we have Karen Worthington, who is a client partner at Facebook. She has a strong track record of leading teams in proposition development, customer analytics, and data-driven marketing. With extensive experience in growing and negotiating large commercial partnerships, she's developed, implemented, and scaled major business initiatives for a multitude of household brands such as P&G, Sainsbury's, BP, American Express, Expedia, Coutts, Lloyds, and many more. Then we have Louise Coppola, who is Associate Director for Social Media, Content Production and Influencer Marketing at OMD. Louise has over 7 years experience in creating, leading and managing social media content and influencer marketing clients, their strategies and campaigns. In her time, she has led and managed many campaigns with the teams at OMD UK, including Wix, Rimmel London, Celebrity Cruises, and most recently South Eastern Railway. And finally, we have Barry Davidson, who is a Social Media Associate Director for MediaCom Beyond Advertising. Barry has an extensive history of working in the marketing and advertising industry. Having started his career in radio at BBC Radio Newcastle and Essex, he then took on roles such as social media video producer and travel blogger before moving into account management. He has a strong media and communication professional skills with a CIM professional certificate in marketing. So, thanks very much for joining us, guys. I'll put a couple of questions to you now, and then obviously everybody else on the call, please feel free to add your questions in the Q&A section. So if we start, we saw that users are consuming social at a 70% immediate, 20% interactive, and 10% immersive ratio. Are brands reflecting this in what they're posting? And perhaps if I start with Louise.
Yeah, sure. I think probably prior to coronavirus, not to dwell on it for too long because I'm sure everyone's sick of hearing about it. I think probably brands were doing that, so they were focusing a lot of their time on that 70% portion. But I think since we've kind of all been in lockdown and things have changed and social has ultimately become more social again, so we're using it as a means to keep connected and kind of find community with our local areas and keep in touch with our friends more and our family. I think I'm definitely seeing more of a shift towards that more of immersive content style. So you've got things like gyms doing online classes now and brands doing baking classes, and I think that's a really interesting shift, and I'll be interested to see how that carries on sort of post-pandemic. I think it's probably a behaviour that people are getting more used to as well. People are sort of adapting to it. So I think, yeah, brands are doing it, but I do think in the last sort of 12 weeks or so, things have changed, and I think it will continue to change as well, would be my thoughts on it.
Fantastic, thank you, Louise. Barry, is there anything you would add to that?
Yeah, sure. I think what I would say is we've been, as social marketers, aware of those kind of statistics for a while. What I would say is I've yet to see a plan laid down in quite that way. What we will tend to do for brands is focus more on the overall objectives of the campaign, kind of aligned to, is it an awareness or is it a conversion or is it a consideration piece? Somewhere in the middle. However, what I would say is, depending on where we place the campaign's objectives, according to what we want the audience to think, feel or do, we then fall into those buckets. So we will be saying, like, if it's a broad awareness thing, it's that quick sort of awareness, and then if we want people to consider us more, we'd start to be thinking about more immersive content. So it's sort of come in the planning process, would come in, certainly before we go live, but a little bit down the track.
Great, thank you, Barry. And Abby, is there anything you would add to that at all?
I think the main thing that I would say is I completely agree with Louise. We've seen that across our channels as well, how much more immersive content has been, I suppose, and how we've had to almost take that shift along with it. Live is a great example of that. I've seen so many brands hosting more live videos than I think I've ever seen before in the past, which I think, it's a great opportunity for people to do so. And yeah, I think the main thing with that as well, it just gives that whole community feel, like Louise said. So yeah, I completely agree with everything that she said with that.
Great, thank you, guys. I'll move on to the next question. Just a reminder, guys, if you have got any questions on the webinar, our audience, please do pop them in the Q&A section. I'll try and get through as many as possible. So we've established that an ad's effectiveness isn't necessarily linked to the view duration or vanity metrics like engagement rate. So how can or how should brands measure the performance of their social advertising? Karen, if I can start with you.
Yeah, sure. I think it's important for brands to think about their business outcomes. So what is it you're trying to achieve? Customer acquisition or sales, or are you trying to grow perception or change perceptions of your brand? And once businesses understand that, then there are tools, I mean, especially when it comes to Facebook's platforms, that allow them to measure the outcomes they want. So let's take, for example, online sales. You can track your online sales using Facebook Pixel, feed that back to Facebook, and then you can measure exactly what you're selling as a result of our advertising. We have other tools that allow you, for example, to run surveys to customers that have seen your brand ads so that you can ask about the impact of those ads on their attitudes. So that, again, especially now, given the period we're in, think about your business outcome and measure that outcome.
Great, thank you, Karen. And Barry, would anything you would add to that?
Yeah, definitely. So I completely agree with what Karen says there in terms of the thing to, and this is something I've been advising clients for many years now, is focus on what the marketing objective. Focus on what the marketing objective is. What is it that you actually do want to achieve with your kind of target audience? That said, I think the reality of social media marketing from owned channels and also within the influencer marketing space is that there isn't always the budget, the scale, or the ambition to be looking at big brand studies, or maybe it's not even a DR campaign, so you can't measure conversion. So we do look at things like those other, what we would probably describe as softer social metrics, sometimes as proxies for the success of a piece of content. And I always advise my clients to say, look at your engagement statistics holistically. Don't say, is it shares, or is it likes, or is it comments? Like, you need to look at them as a whole and get the full context. Like, you might have lots and lots of comments on a post, all negative. It's really negative PR for the brand, for example. So yeah, it's like kind of look at it as a whole, really.
Great, thank you, Barry. I'm going to skip to a couple of questions now from the wider audience. So from Alvin Hussey, this one's probably for Will and Abby. So, do you think your tips would apply to Snapchat and TikTok? As your example, obviously the examples were mainly sort of Facebook and Instagram. So, how have we seen these channels change and develop during the current situation?
Abby, do you want to go first? I know Abby's been spending a lot of time on TikTok recently.
Yeah.
Or YouTube for that matter.
Yeah, no problem. So TikTok in particular then, that's a huge platform for me at the minute. I absolutely love TikTok for starters. And, you know, if anybody's watching who's not on it, I definitely recommend getting on TikTok as soon as possible. I think a lot of what Will said can apply to that. It is very much short form kind of content, very kind of quick to consume. However, what I love about TikTok in particular is the fact that you get so immersed in the app as a whole, and the way that they serve content to you is very specific to you as an individual. So I would say with TikTok, keep it short and simple. Make sure you kind of got that hook at the start, the same way as Will's been speaking about, but also obviously do bear in mind the fact that you know, it is a very immersive app as well, and keep on top of trends with that. Snapchat as well, very short, so I do think that applies. YouTube, however, I would say that I suppose you need to look at it more on like a long form basis, which I suppose we look at more from the publisher side with Facebook in particular, long form content, which is where our divide sits. But yeah, I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Will.
Yeah, I would say, you know, we want to talk about Facebook and Instagram a lot on this, not just because Karen is on it, and we're very grateful for that, but also because Facebook and Instagram are still absolutely massive, and Facebook is by far and away, I mean, it's got a third of all of humanity on it. So that is where a lot of the eyeballs are, which, and you know, we are very well established on it, which is why we focus on it a lot. But of course, we are on the other social networks as well, particularly with a lot of focus on TikTok at the moment. What I would say is you've got to plan based on the channel. Absolutely. You know, we were looking at stats yesterday. 4% of YouTube videos watched with sound off. So instantly that kind of changes things. the classic example of what it is to be a Londoner, the Nike ad, which everybody absolutely loves. I watched that, and the first few seconds are the back of someone's head as they walk into a corner shop. So the thing about that is it's Nike, it's on YouTube, it's being pushed in a way that is very PR led. You've got to see this ad. And so in those examples, you can kind of take your time a bit more. I would still argue for the vast majority of all of us who aren't working on a Nike, you still want to make sure that it hooks you in the right way as quickly as possible. I think that is the user behavior that people are scrolling through feeds. You just got to bear that in mind, but then you can tweak it and adapt it based on the channel that you're going to be advertising on.
Thank you, Will, and thanks for the question, Alvin. It's actually just for everybody on the call who are interested in knowing a little bit more about TikTok. We are due to host another webinar, which is solely focused on TikTok. It's a couple of weeks. I'm not sure if the date's been penciled in just yet, but obviously you guys will all get invites to that as well. Another question. So this is to all the panelists. So. Do you think the rise of TikTok will continue post-COVID, or do you think it will drop or go back to normal? I think, yeah, so I'll perhaps go to Barry first on that one. So do you think the rise of TikTok will continue post-COVID, or do you think it will drop once we go back to normal?
Thanks, Mark. No, absolutely. TikTok's here to stay, in my view. It's a nascent social channel. Certainly in the UK, it's not as big as it is in other parts of the world, but it's catching up fast, and they're launching you probably have already seen they're launching their sort of first TV campaigns to kind of build awareness and downloads of the app here in the UK. And I think the COVID situation has been really great for growth of that particular channel. I mean, the main difference in terms of user content is that there's always that little bit of time investment involved in content produced on the channel, and people have a lot of time at their disposal at the moment to create it and consume it. So from that respect, it's not surprising to see it grow. I think they're very serious about growth in the UK. There are hurdles with TikTok. Our Group M policy at the moment is that there are still outstanding brand safety issues with TikTok, which means that we find it harder to advertise on the channel at the moment, but that's not to say that won't change in the future. However, when we work with publishing partners and with influencers specifically, we are able to leverage those audience much more effectively. That's something we at Mediacom we recommend a lot, is that actually if you're using the trusted voice of an influencer, someone who has that audience, that's often a more effective way for a brand to land some of their key messages and run some really established campaigns. But what I expect to see, the channel mature in the next year and make it much easier for advertisers to activate in the space.
Great, thank you, Barry. So I'm going to ask another question from the audience. I'll perhaps start with you, Karen. So does Facebook see better ad performance with video than stills in general? And that's from Jacqueline Buckland.
Broadly, yes. I think that video tends to perform better. When I say video, I'm referring to motion. So just going back to Will's earlier point, just something very short that moves, it does tend to perform better, but not in all cases. So unfortunately, I don't have a very straightforward answer for you. And I think what you should always do is test and learn. So for example, with some brands, if they are doing something very DR-led, and they want to sell, they just want to show a still of a product. If they're kind of discounting, especially, they just want to show the discount on the product and that's it. But I think more often than not, you should err on the side of caution and incorporate movement into your ads.
I think sorry, just to
go for it.
Add to that, in my experience, what makes sense for the ad. We back in my McDonald's days, did an ad which flavour milkshake do you like to dip your fries into, and we were weighing up whether we should do a video or not, and we just thought a video would actually really overcomplicate things, and so we did a static image, and that post did so well it got written about in a newspaper in New Zealand, as well as making it to Wired, Cosmo, The Sun, etc. And that was just a static image of something that was shot on mobile. So I think just think about, I agree with Karen that video in motion will probably help, but does it need it? What's going to work best for what you're trying to convey?
Thanks. Well, Louise, would you add anything?
I think it definitely depends on what you're trying to do. And I think when I think back to sort of memorable ads that I've seen, I think it is those ones that are capturing your attention. I think motion and video can definitely help do that, especially when, as Will said earlier, we are scrolling through like 90 meters of content every day. So I think having motion can help it. I think as well, when you're looking at what you're trying to do, potentially a video could be stronger than an image alone. But we've got some travel clients at OMD, for example, and one of those is Tourism Island. So we use a mixture of both in-feed videos and also stories as well to actually help bring that to life. And it's through beautiful imagery because it's travel and it's destination related, which is all captured by influencers. And then we'll also ask them to create videos as well because we know it works. So I feel like a hybrid of the two is good, but I think definitely looking at what you're trying to do from the outset helps to determine what is the right route. So yeah, as Will said, sometimes a static will work well, but then ultimately motion also helps too. So I think a bit of both is the ideal if you can do it.
It's like that Domino's example, because I don't want to sound like I'm kind of contradicting myself. That Domino's example, the picture on the left, it didn't really focus on any one product, and therefore it was all just a beige kind of wallpaper, whereas the video really focused on one and made it look really delicious. So if you want to make something look really delicious, even with a static image, there's better ways of doing it than that first example I showed you. You could just do a really close-up shot, and I think that would still do a great job.
Fantastic. So guys, Will talked about the 3-second audition. Should we now be calling it the 0.5 second audition? Abby, I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, I think the main thing with this is it's all about hooking the audience in as soon as possible. So I'd say that if there is the option to do that in 0.5 seconds, then definitely do it. The earlier you can do it, the better. We tend to stick around the 3-second mark when we're looking at creating longer form content, just because obviously it's about setting out that storyline. But yeah, I'd say, you know, if it's possible for you to do so, then definitely do it. And, you know, just kind of looking at ways to do that as well. It's, you know, you've got to understand your audience more than anything. So kind of getting to know what they want to see, and it can be something as simple as, you know, casting the right person who your audience can relate to do that within that short time period. So yeah.
Yeah, great. I think an example was the Bosch video that Will showed us earlier, wasn't it? Where you almost, you know, very early on, you're showing sort of, you know, what we're working towards. Karen, any thoughts from you on that?
Yeah, I guess the way I think about it is you've got half a second to grab someone's attention and about 2.5 seconds to convince them that they want to stay for longer and look at more content. Because if you think about how quickly people are scrolling, like you said, I think on average it's about 2.5 seconds to get from the bottom to the top of your screen, a bit faster if you're younger, a bit slower if you're older, but kind of like there or thereabouts. So yeah, half a second to grab attention, 2.5 seconds to encourage people to stay around for more.
Thanks very much. Really interesting. So next question. What are some of the ways that Facebook can help brands get the most out of their social creative and supporting paid activity? So Karen, perhaps I'll start with you on this one.
Yeah, there's actually so many resources available. I joined Facebook a couple of years ago. I had no idea all of this stuff existed. A really good place for people to start is by visiting facebook.com/business. And on there is access to tools to check your creative, inspiring content from other advertisers. There's market research on there about consumers or moments that might be pertinent for your advertising. There's also something called Facebook IQ, and that's data pulled from the global market research that we've done that you can kind of pull out and manipulate yourself and use that to build your plans around your advertising.
Great, thank you. And guys, anyone else on the panel got any other sort of tips or tricks?
The one thing I would say, more than anything, is to really make use, like Karen said, obviously of the resources that Facebook offer, but making sure as well that you're really, really up to date with guideline changes and testing out new tools as well that Facebook introduce. So if you're posting organically in particular, really looking at Creator Studio and video content in particular, using the video checklist to make sure that you're getting the most out of the content that you're posting and hitting all the points that that Facebook would want you to hit.
Yeah, and I would add something that I used to look at a lot is there's a bar, a kind of a line chart that shows where people are kind of dropping off when watching a video on average. And so I find that really helpful because, you know, you can look at stats and go, great, we reached 1 million people. But then if the average was the majority of people didn't actually see the bit where you showed your product, then, you know, 1 million people, basically the majority didn't actually see what you were trying to promote. So it's always good to be keeping an eye on that. When are people like to drop off? Why did they drop off? At what point did they drop off? And what did the video show at that point? What made them do that? And then how can you apply that for future campaigns as well?
I agree with Will as well. I think it's also super important to have, and I guess it depends on the setup of kind of how your content, how your socials run with your brand. So at OMD, we have our specialist paid social team and we have our content team as well. And we have a really good feedback loop with them, which definitely helps in that they learn from us and we can learn from them. And the continuing like testing and learning helps inform future creative as well. And I think that feedback loop is paramount to seeing how things perform and seeing how you can improve and tweak every time you run a new campaign. And then to build on Karen's point as well, I think Facebook Blueprint is great. So those are different training courses that you can do all around various elements on Facebook. And I think those are great for anyone who can access them to do. And I think they've just added another, I think I saw another 20 yesterday in the press. I think they're really good as a place to start as well if you're looking for more kind of in-depth guidance on how you can utilize Facebook better for your marketing. So I definitely recommend those as well.
Great, thank you. And Barry, is there anything you want to add in there?
No, I think the rest of the panel have probably kind of covered it quite comprehensively.
Great. Okay. Another question from the audience. So, how do you quantify the most meaningful engagement on either Facebook or Instagram campaigns that aren't using direct response, sales/conversion tracking? Is watch time something you're looking at? Is it the number of shares? Which is the most valuable? Perhaps Karen could start with you on that one.
Yeah, I think, well, just giving the two metrics there, I would say watch time over the number of shares. I mean, with all of what we find in Facebook is we've run studies across thousands of advertisers, and there isn't a correlation between the length of time someone is watching something for and then their decision to go and buy something or what they think about your brand. That's looking at it on a mass scale. But if you look at it on a one-to-one perspective, then if you are doing a good job, people will look for longer. What not everybody will do is click and share, because that just isn't the way people behave. I mean, I know for me in particular, I'm a massive Instagram fan. I check it multiple times a day. I don't even want to think about how many. I never click on anything. I never like anything. I never share anything. I never click on anything. I just like looking at content. So I think probably that's the best proxy. The other thing to think about is the number of people you're reaching. There's lots of research that's gone into advertising to say that actually what you just need more people to know about you and be aware of you. So I think they're probably the two things that I would I'd focus on if I couldn't measure sales or directly ask people about the impact an ad's had.
Something that in my previous life, we would let's basically kind of 5 things. It shouldn't just be one of engagement rates. Although I don't want to completely do. Karen's absolutely right. You can look at a great ad, laugh out loud, show it to your other half, and then keep scrolling without clicking on it, which I regularly do. But what I would say is organic reach is likely to be bigger if more people are interacting with, watching or sharing or commenting. So if organic reach is high, that's a good sign, but it doesn't mean it's necessarily the be all and end all. Engagement rate, same thing. If I like something, if I really like something, I'm more likely to engage with it, although you've got to be careful because research has shown that older people are more likely to click on an ad. And there's a case study of an athleisure wear company going after very much 16 to 24-year-olds. The 16 to 24-year-olds didn't click on it at all, but they still remembered seeing the ad and they still bought the product. But people aged 50 plus clicked on it the most, and obviously weren't actually buying it. So you can't make that the be all and end all, but it's still important to consider. You can do ad recall when you buy in a certain way on Facebook advertising. You can track estimated ad recall. So it's what Facebook deems people are likely, the percentage of people are likely to remember seeing the ad. So take that into consideration as well if it's all about brand awareness. And then what I'd really also encourage is talk to your other departments. So we would run posts about a specific product every month or so. It wasn't part of a big campaign, it was kind of part of our always on strategy. But what we then did is we spoke to the insights team in the business and said, do you see a general trend of sales of that product go up when we talk about it on social? And by looking at the data over the course of 6 months plus, we were able to see that yes, we did, even though there wasn't a kind of click to buy now link. So it's a number of things that you should be looking at to help build up that picture beyond just simply, reach or clicks or likes.
Thank you, Will. And I've got a question here from Hannah Parry. So at Studio 71, there is a strong emphasis on influencer marketing right now in the general media landscape, but brands are also increasingly keen to incorporate data and more measurable metrics. From a brand perspective, what do you think is the best way to combine the creative side of influencer marketing and data-driven results? Barry?
Well, that's a good question. So I think we have a really thriving influencer marketing team at Mediacom at the moment, and I'd probably go so as far as to say that we do a lot more in influencer marketing now than we do in organic social. The challenge in influencer marketing has always been and remains to be is like, how do you get that attribution, or how do you, like, what metrics are we really looking at? Because on the one hand, we talk about, focus on reach, focus on, econometrics modeling and conversions and whatever it is in social. But then when we go to influencer marketing, we're looking at engagement rates all of the time. But I think what we're starting to see now is much more of a merge between the world of paid social media and influencer marketing. And that started to open doors for us in terms of what we can actually measure and where we can, see that reach was in the right places, or how long attention was on particular stuff. And then taking that one step further is then starting to link that into, it's the sort of the journey that we went on with organic social about 5 or 6 years ago, is taking it from just page metrics into more robust marketing kind of KPIs. And I think that's what's happening at the moment. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I feel it's something that's in the stage of evolution, and I think we're quite quickly getting to a point where that's going to be, we're going to be able to show much more robust measurement in that area.
I think to build on that as well from what Barry said, I think what you can do as well, I think working with influencers is a whole other kettle of fish. It's a totally kind of different way of working. I think they have built their audiences from scratch. They know what works. I think really kind of leaning into them. They're brands in their own right, some of them with huge followings. They'll know what works, drive the best results. I think that's a nice way you can balance creativity. We've recently done a campaign with Walkers and Aaron Kraskell at OMD, and he knew exactly the right thumbnail he had to include on his creative in order to drive the views. And we had to obviously encourage the brand to let him kind of make that decision, because ultimately he is judged on how good his creative is. So that's kind of a nice way to kind of manage that creative. And I think from the kind of data-driven side, it's really worth looking kind of outside the box of the traditional metrics. So we can do stuff at OMD, we do different sort of social listening dashboards to help with that and actually look at, depending on the campaign you're trying to run, we can track different things. So with the Walkers and Aaron Crestcourt example, we were able to build a measurement framework which allowed us to actually track his affinity with the brand and measure that, which is a really nice way of perhaps something that, as Barry said, 5 or 6 years ago with organic social, it's kind of very obvious. It's kind of now moving into those kind of richer and more deeper insights. And I think that's a really interesting space in terms of how you can.
Yeah, I agree, Louise. And we're doing similar things. I don't know about you, but we're also seeing the influencer marketing landscape almost divide within itself between, you know, like your high-end macro influencers, which really you feel was more like a talent buy, and then like huge growth in the micro influencer space where you get good scale, but it's kind of feels like much more closer to we're even talking about it like it's UGC now with micro influencers, because it's like real people, like, you know, any one of us creating that content. And then you're right to point out social media listening as well is a great way to, you know, add depth to the data set that you're able to share with the client.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much. And a question from me. So as a publisher, we follow Facebook recommendations to aim for our videos to capture a viewer's attention for at least 1 minute. Should brands be doing the same for their posts, or is it a 5 to 15 seconds ad still okay for brands? Karen, your thoughts on that?
I think it just depends whether you're talking about organic activity or paid activity, because they work very differently. From an organic perspective, you do want people to stay around for as long as possible. And from a paid perspective, then you're asking for quite a different behaviour from somebody. So I think if brands have got something that's genuinely interesting to their audience, then, you know, you should expect more. I think brands just need to be very honest with themselves about, you know, how passionate their audience might be about their content, or how entertaining the content, or whatever the value add is there, and whether or not it warrants a user giving that extra time. And if it doesn't, just get your point across as quickly as you can to make sure that they take away the message you need them to.
Thank you, Karen. And just another follow-up question from me, again to you, Karen. So I'm sure lots of people will be interested to hear this. So I know Facebook have focused on launching a lot of new features during this crisis. What stands out for you?
I think the thing I'm most excited about is, well, there are two things. One, I'm really excited about our efforts around commerce. So I think it was last week we announced the launch of Shops. And so that's going to be a product where you, either through a business profile on Instagram or a business page on Facebook, you now will see a shop logo or button, and brands can display all of their shopping posts in one place. So they should think of it like their storefront. They can put their own imagery on there, really build a brand up. And that's so that anyone, any advertisers, big or small, can have a shop front that's easily accessible to everybody. If you're in the States where we're testing checkout, you can purchase directly on the platform, and in the UK you would click through to the website. So I think those efforts around commerce are really exciting, because it just opens up a world of opportunity for businesses. And again, as an Instagram fan, I'm always seeing things on Instagram that I want to buy, and the easier you make that for me, the better. I'm also loving new features that allow me to set up group chats with my friends more easily as well. So Rooms for me is it's just been a really good way of connecting with my friends.
Yeah, thanks very much, Karen. It's something we're all super at, both Rooms and Shops is something that we're really excited about here as well. I'm sure brands are going to love it too. So, guys, I'm just really conscious of time, and we, you know, I don't want to keep people longer than we initially said. So I just want to thank everyone, all the audience that joined us on this webinar. The questions that we've been unable to get through, and there are quite a few, apologies, but we'll come back to you separately on those. A huge thanks to our panel. You guys have been amazing as well. If you've got any further questions you'd like to take offline, please get in touch. If there's anything else at all you'd like to discuss, or if we can support you in any way, please let me know. My details are on the slide now. Get in contact. And finally, if you've not managed to watch all this webinar, or if you'd like to share it, we will be putting a recorded version on the Electric House website, which is electrichouse.co.uk. Thanks again, everyone, to the audience and the panel, and yeah, really appreciate you coming along. Have a great day.